Recognized, Uncle Walker, D01. Recognized, Robin, B20.
Robin, Lagan, Beetle, you're Gamma. Prep the bioship. You're headed to New Orleans.
Gamma always gets the soft gigs.
Tim, you'll be running Gamma.
Me? Dick, I've never led a squad before.
Making this a good opportunity to get your feet wet as a field leader.
Because it's Gamma and you're not expecting trouble? Or because we're stretched thin and you have no choice?
Just don't die, okay?
Today in the cave, we welcome the incredibly talented Cameron Bowen. Cameron's television and film credits begin in 1996 with Law and Order and stretches across voice and live action parts on Touched by an Angel, Frasier, ER, Mystic River, Seabiscuit, Malcolm in the Middle, Avatar, The Last Airbender, and of course, as the third Robin, Tim Drake in Season 2 of Young Justice. Cameron, we are honored to welcome you to the cave. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks for that incredible intro. I want to put that as my
so
voicemail.
Excited about that. People who have listened to the show know that I'm an enormous Dick Grayson fan. He's my guy. Tim Drake is my second Robin, and so I'm incredibly excited about this, and it means a lot, so thank you.
Hey, at least you got in there.
Oh, man.
It'd be weird if you were like, he's my 12th favorite Robin.
He's my 12th, right up there, solid 12. We're going to get into that. Before we begin, though, I want to remind everyone that our discussion episodes draw on anything and everything related to Young Justice, including both seasons of the series so far, the comics, and the video game. If you've not seen, read, or played all the material and are spoiler-wary, consider this your warning. In this interview as well, we may spoil any number of other projects Cameron has worked on, so keep that in mind. And with all that out of the way, let's dive in. So our usual perspective question for our guests is, when did you first see Young Justice? And that doesn't really apply.
Well, it does, actually.
Does it? Interesting.
Well, yeah, because I was brought in on the second season. So,
excellent point.
Believe it or not, I was not aware of the show. And when I auditioned for the show, I'm sure a lot of you have heard this story, I didn't audition for Young Justice. I auditioned for something called Cloud Ninja.
Okay. I have not heard this story.
I auditioned for the title role in a series called Cloud Ninja, and I auditioned from home, and then I got called in for the callback with Jamie Thomason and Curtis Kohler, and Greg was there, and Brandon, and...
Wait, was Greg and Brandon doing that show? Or they just happened to be there?
So, I didn't know what was up, but Jason Marsden was in the waiting room, and I'm a huge Jason Marsden fan. Because I grew up in the 90s, and he was big in the 90s. I mean, he's still big, but a lot of the shows that I've loved, Static Shock, and I loved The Weekenders, and The Goofy Movie, and all these things. So he's in the waiting room, and I'm talking with him, and Jamie comes out and gets me, and the lines were like... So there was Cloud Ninja, Lightning Ninja, and Thunder Ninja. And the lines were, Thunder, I want you to take out the blast cannons. Lightning, go over there and have my 6. I want them out of commission, right? So So they were like, okay, so I want you to play it way more serious. Your mortality is on the line. Okay, so I do that, and I feel really good about the audition.
I see where this is going.
And I walk out. And then I get a call like maybe a week later, and my agent says, "You booked Robin." And I said, "What?" And she goes, "Yeah, you booked Robin." And I said, "On what?" And she goes, "On Young Justice." And I said, "What's that?" And she was like, "So you auditioned for Cloud Ninja, but this is actually the second season of Young Justice." And I was like, "Oh." So I looked it up, and I was incredibly impressed because I grew up watching Batman the Animated Series. It was probably my favorite show, and it was a lot of the same people, or at least voice talent. So I just crash coursed the first season. I really don't remember too much of it until I watched it. I watched it again after that, and it's so good.
Yeah.
And so I crash coursed it before I went in to record, but I knew nothing. I didn't know that I was going to be Tim Drake, and I didn't know really too much about what was going to happen with the second season until I got in there. Then they told me it's 5 years in the future. You cannot talk about it at all because they'd had problems with some of the first season being spoiled.
Yeah.
And what an incredible surprise. I mean, the shoes to fill, with the previous guys who'd played Robin, Luckily, I didn't feel as much pressure as I probably should have going in there for the first episode because I really didn't know what I was getting into. I thought potentially they were recasting Dick Grayson. Like I didn't know anything. So then I get in there and we have that awesome thing that you heard from Crispin and Jason where we're all recording as a cast. And it was me and Jason and Eric. And then Jesse was in there later.
So I'm sorry, I have to ask this question. Sorry to interrupt you, but to clarify, this Cloud Ninja show did not exist.
Didn't exist.
And it was a cover, and that scene you're talking about is the scene with Blue Beetle and Lagan.
Yeah, from True Colors.
Tim in True. Oh my God, that's you were saying that scene, and I'm like, oh my goodness.
Blue, form up. Yeah. Take out his plasma cannon. I want it out of commission. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So, and that my favorite line from the entire series, I'm a little biased, but is, if we go down fighting. You know? Nice. And I feel like that completely encapsulated the jump for season 3 with the internet just coming together and all the fans bringing it back. If we go down, we go down fighting.
Nice. Oh my God, you just blew my mind, man. I have never heard that story.
Well, hey, hopefully Cloud Ninja gets produced one of these days with me and Jason and Eric.
That would be fantastic. Yeah. Oh my God, what a great way to start our season 2 stuff as well, reviews. Oh my God. I have so many questions now. So you said you weren't really sure until you walked in what was going on. So they just told you Robin. They didn't tell you Tim Drake, obviously, right? You got the part of Robin, and you didn't know what was going on until you walked in, right?
Right, and like I said, I wasn't familiar with the show. So I looked it up on the internet, and I saw, they already have the Robin. They already have a Robin.
Right.
So I must be, I thought potentially they were bringing in either Jason Todd or Tim Drake.
Okay.
But I wasn't sure. So I just kind of prepared for it all.
Well, then that folds into my next question, which is, you knew these characters. Like, what's your experience with, DC and comics in general before you got this part? Like, did you
Very limited.
Okay. But you knew who Jason and Tim were, so that's not nothing,
Well, it's not nothing, but I'd seen, I'm not so much a comic fan as I am cartoons. I still almost exclusively watch cartoons. And I knew vaguely who Jason was. He's become a lot bigger since then. Yeah. After season 2, I also saw Under the Red Hood, which is that incredible movie Brandon did. And he was in the Arkham games, and so I vaguely knew who Jason was beforehand. So I loved Batman the Animated Series, and I loved all of the animated movies and the live action movies, of course. But as far as Robin, it was a limited amount of information that I had already stored, which I think played to my benefit because I wasn't really doing an impression, of a previous role, and I didn't feel like there was a bar that I had to hit, if that makes sense. I felt like I was creating the character from scratch. Mm-hmm. And if you notice, I was on a few episodes, but there were a bunch of episodes that Tim was in the show, but my voice wasn't, right? And you heard this from Crispin. We'd go stretches where we wouldn't be in the show, and then we wouldn't get the scripts for those episodes.
Right.
So you come back, and they had to, similar with when Crispin was talking about them explaining to him the complicated story about all of the clones. I remember I had a scene with Arsenal, and I was like, "Oh, Crispin, what's happening here?" And they had to explain the whole thing to me. But in that time, you can kind of hear that Tim grows up a little bit. And I think, the story obviously made that happen. I think that in the first episode of season 2, he's given Gamma Squad, and he's sort of thrust into responsibility. And, he says, "Dick, I've never led a squad before." And he's very unsure, but he's also scared that, his predecessor was killed.
Did you know that? Like that line where Dick, there's that pregnant pause, and Dick says, "Just don't die," was like a punch in the face for me. Yeah. Because I'm like, okay, well, they clearly skipped to Tim. Is Jason in this? Because we hadn't seen that hologram in the grotto yet. So they did give us as much information as pertained to our characters for the scene that we were in. So any backstory that they felt was helpful, they were really great. Jamie Thomason is an incredible voice director.
I had worked with him in the past, and he's just one of my favorites to work with. And yeah, he was like, Cam, this, when he says that, the gravity of the statement, just don't die, he said, that's on your mind. That's been on your mind since you joined the team.
Yeah.
Because of the reason you joined the team, that the spot was vacated.
Yeah.
So I knew. Obviously, that's not my reaction in the show because it's all animated. But I love Tim's reaction, which is just wide eyes.
Yeah.
Because you see the immaturity there too.
Yeah, exactly. And so here, I don't know if you know this or if you can even answer this. So if there's anything you can't answer, please don't do it. But so Tim, one of the reasons why Tim is my next favorite Robin is because the idea of, well, first of all, I was one of those horrible monsters who actually called up and spent 50 cents to vote to kill Jason back in the day. So Jason was not a great character. He wasn't well thought out. The first appearance of Jason, he was just a carbon copy of Dick in a really bad way. Mm-hmm. But then they did the Crisis on Infinite Earths, and they rebooted everything, and they rebooted Jason's history, where he was more like a street tough, and so they can make him different than Dick. But then he just also wasn't learning, didn't listen. He just didn't grow as a character. He was just having problems then. And so when they decided to kill him in A Death in the Family, there was a long pause where there was no Robin, and it was the 90s, so everything was all gritty and terrible.
Is that when they did it? That was the first time that they killed Jason, was in the 90s?
Death in the Family, I have to look at exactly, but I think it was 1989. And so Batman got into, I have to look that up, but Batman got into this phase in the 90s where all the readers were asking things like, I want more Punisher. I don't know why people aren't just shooting villains. Like, what is this? And that's where you get these like 4-issue miniseries like Kingdom Come. And in Kingdom Come, it's basically a story making a point of what are heroes and what are anti-heroes and why is Superman different than Punisher and blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. But my point is that when Tim showed up, Tim was unique all in and of himself. He was a brilliant kid who had figured out who Robin was and therefore figured out who Batman was, and then saw that Batman was going down a really dark path, and then just shows up in the Batcave one day because he'd sussed out all of this detective work stuff. So he had been there the night that Dick Grayson's parents died, and he knew, because he has a photographic memory or near photographic memory, he knows what the Flying Grayson's acrobatic routines are. There's that scene in the first season where Jack Haley says, some things you can't hide, like the sight of a Grayson on the trapeze.
Which I think Jack Haley was Mike, what's his name? He's the stapler guy from Office Space.
Yes, he was. Yeah, exactly. Actually, Caleb told me that. I didn't know that.
Sorry to cut you off.
But no, that's okay. But when he says that, that's the whole point of Tim. So Tim saw those acrobatic moves, and then he was watching video of Robin in action and realizing, oh my gosh, that must be Dick Grayson, which means he was adopted by Bruce, which means blah, 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 blah. And went all the way down the line. But he showed up in the cave not because, hey, I want to be Robin and meet my hero. He showed up in the cave because he cared. He was full of hope, and he showed up and said, you're going down a dark path. You need a Robin. It doesn't have to be me. You need someone. Something's wrong, And so I wonder how much of any of that plays into the Young Justice version of Tim, based on what you were just saying about how he joined the team.
I don't know how much they decided as far as that goes. I mean, I tried to do as much research as possible. And so I read that whole storyline before I showed up on the first day. And so, that still kind of goes into the whole immaturity thing that I was getting to, which was, like you said, he didn't seek out this role. And whether that was the role of Robin or, Batman's assistant or whatever, he definitely didn't seek out the role of team leader. And I really do feel like that was thrust upon him.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was getting into was Dick Grayson has this carefree spirit. And also in the first season, he wants to be the leader. Especially in the first episode, he doesn't see why it shouldn't be him. Eventually it should be, And I don't think Tim ever has that. I think Tim kind of grows into it because it's his circumstance. And so, in the end of episode 1 of season 2, when he gets that nod from Dick, it's so satisfying.
Yeah.
Because this isn't some arrogant kid who is looking for glory. He's trying to gain the admiration of his big brother.
Yeah.
Greg kind of referred to it as like the seniors and the freshmen. And, Blue and Tim and, what's his name? Yuri played him, the big blowfish.
Oh, Lagoon.
Yeah. They were the freshmen, and Dick and the team were the seniors. And I think we can all relate with that feeling.
Yeah.
And I have 2 older brothers. And funny enough, actually, I've known Jesse since I was a little kid.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So there was also some of that in there, too. I'm coming into his show. He knows all these people, and he's worked with them, and he's done a terrific job. So I want to come in there and fit right in. So that was very, very organic for me, wanting to fill those shoes.
Well, can we talk about that a little bit? Because unlike the other guests we've had on the show, even the voice actors, you have a bit of a unique entry into acting. You're one of... You have 5 siblings?
5, yeah.
5. So there's 6 of you total, and all of you are actors? Is that correct?
Yeah, at one time or another, we've all been actors.
In fact, Andrea, your sister Andrea, actually played Talia at some point.
Yeah,
right?
she did. Yeah, nice research. Yeah. She played Talia on Batman the Brave and the Bold.
Right.
And yeah, Andrea has had a lot of success in acting, probably more than the rest of us. But, we've all been doing it for years and years, and I feel very fortunate because I don't think I would have ever gotten into it if it weren't for my older siblings. I don't know what I would have done, but it's the greatest thing in my life, so I'm very thankful to them. And
where do you fall in the 6? Are you the youngest?
I'm second to youngest.
Middle?
And Andrea is my little sister, yeah.
Oh, interesting. And your parents weren't involved in this? They weren't involved in acting enough?
No, my dad owned a sheet music store and was in a band in Ohio.
Okay. Where in Ohio, out of
Columbus.
Curiosity? I was born in Athens, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I was born at Ohio State University Hospital.
Oh, wow. That's so funny.
Yeah, so, when I was around, 4, I started doing community theater. I did A Midsummer Night's Dream and, some local commercials. And
Sorry, did you say when you were 4?
When I was 4, yeah. Just because I had these older siblings, and if your siblings play football, you want to play football,
Right. Yeah, sure.
And my siblings were into theater. So when I was around 6, my older sister got this idea, Jessica, and she, I believe, was, she was born in 82, I was born in 88. So if I was 6, she was 12. And she decided that she wanted to go to New York, and because that's where, it was happening. And my parents were like, yeah, okay, we can maybe go on a vacation. We never really took vacations. We were sort of, because we were all so close in age and we were a tight-knit group, we never really did stuff like that. We had a 15-passenger van, and we would drive places and we'd sing show tunes. We would sing One Day More, and all of us would have a part. So that was kind of like our vacations. And then my sister got it in her head that she wanted to go to New York. So she got together a little jar and started pooling the money. And, being 6 years old, I didn't have any money. But what she told me was that if I told my parents that I wanted to go to New York, she'd give me $5. So I told my parents I wanted to go to New York. So we go to New York, and we stay at the Embassy Suites in New Jersey. And there was this manager, Marianne Leone, who was a very big manager at the time. She had Kirsten Dunst, and she had a ton of young talent. And my dad called her and said, hey, we're coming to New York. And she was like, let me know when you move here. And he was like, oh, we're moving there, which was a lie. And so she sees us. She sees us, and we go in and we perform Sound of Music. We perform my favorite things from Sound of Music, and we all do our little part. And she signed all of
you?
us. Yeah.
Oh, my God. Which was crazy.
Pretty incredible. And I'm not kidding. In the first 2 weeks, Graham, my older brother, Jillian, my older sister, and Alex, my older brother, all booked Broadway shows in the first 2 weeks.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, and Andrea and Jessica and I worked steadily in jingles were a huge thing at the time. Yeah. And we were all doing a bunch of jingles, and I started doing cartoon shows. We were still living at the Embassy Suites, and we lived there for 3 months and we never went back to Ohio. My dad went back and sold the business and moved us on his own while we were pursuing our dreams. And funny enough, it was documented on Oprah. Oprah had did a special on my parents and about how cool they are.
I'm gonna have to look that up because I have to tell you, man, as a parent myself with 2 young kids, it happens a lot where people keep telling us that, oh, your kids should do modeling or whatever, and I'm just like, like if they get older and they say they want to do X, I am all about that, right? Yeah. But there's a certain like age of like having 6 of you and then living in a hotel and having all of you wanting to do this thing. Like my brain as a dad is like exploding. Like, oh my gosh, what would we do? Like,
I mean,
that's crazy.
I meet like a 5-year-old now, and I think to myself, to be able to look at this kid and trust that what he wants is valid.
Especially when you have the influence of so many other siblings who, is he just doing it because they want to do it? And is that actually...
I think that's how it started out. I think that I was doing it because I looked at my older siblings and I wanted to be them. I saw not just the success that they had, but the happiness that they were finding. And, like I said, I've always been a huge consumer of movies and television. I love The Simpsons. I've watched every episode of The Simpsons. And growing up, Saturday morning cartoons were a huge thing. They don't really exist anymore. But I had a VHS tape. And because we ended up being so busy in New York, it was really an incredible time. I would have this VHS tape and I'd record all the shows. And then I'd go home and watch them at night and never sleep. But, my days were like, and, this being New York, you could get a lot done because the metro system is so great there. I'd wake up at like 7:15. I'd walk to school, and I went to a performing arts school called PPAS. Shout out. And they were very understanding. If you had auditions, I would leave every day at lunch and go record. I was on Blue's Clues, and I was on this show called A Little Curious, which still airs every day on HBO Family, which is terrific.
Who are you on Blue's Clues? My kids are just getting into that.
I was a character called Periwinkle, which was the next door neighbor, and he's a cat. He's a cat magician.
Nice.
And don't ask me to do an impression because I can't do it anymore. So I would leave every day at lunch, and I would do that, except for on Wednesdays where I would leave and do a show. And then after school, I would go and do, on-camera auditions and voiceover auditions and jingles and all kinds of stuff. And then at night, I'd do a show. And this was every day.
Jeez.
Yeah. And then when I was like 10, I developed screaming nodes, which is it's a type of growth on your vocal cords. Thankfully, these go away. You don't have to have surgery. So then my lunches turned into going to a speech pathologist to learn how to speak correctly, and going to a doctor so they could look at my vocal cords, and actually going to a masseuse to massage my vocal cords.
Sure. People know now, I guess, if you listen to the show enough, you know that I'm an RN now, but after my first degree back in the day, I was actually a veterinary nurse for 10 years, and then I had my own business. I became a holistic health practitioner. I was a massage therapist with my own business for 10 years. So
wow,
I'm actually familiar with that as well.
So do you know that little spot on the back of the neck that can put someone to sleep?
No, I try to use my powers for good. I don't try to, But for some reason in my life, I just apparently decided to be able to treat every living creature on the planet with Eastern and Western medicine. I don't know how that ended up happening.
That's really beautiful.
But I'm familiar actually with that throat work. That neck work can be amazing. Particularly, I guess, if you're a voice actor. I didn't even think about that because most of the work that I did was people like being in the office and like their necks were jacked up, or they'd have lots of illness or sickness that they'd have to be working with, that they'd have to try and clear. But that's so interesting. I've never heard of that condition. Screaming nodes, you said?
Yeah, and it wasn't because, being a kid on the playground, I would scream. But it wasn't just that. It was both characters that I was playing on the animated series were supposed to be little kids. And even though my voice hadn't changed yet, I was still kind of up here and like crunching my throat, straining. And then I'd go and do the shows at night, and these were also I was Chip in Beauty and the Beast, and I was Gavroche in Les Mis, and then I was in a show called Seussical. So they were all kind of, Beauty and the Beast, Chip is supposed to be pretty young, And Gavroche is kind of like a tough kid. And then Seussical was a show for kids. So I was straining, definitely.
Yeah.
Like all day, every day. Because I was trying to make myself sound young. Even at 10 years old, I was trying to sound younger. And so I had to go see a speech pathologist, which I'm so thankful for now, and actually helped me lose any type of New York accent that I was gathering, which is funny because on that same episode of when we meet Bart Allen, I have to say a line which still bogs me to this day, which is, "You're a tourist from the future?" But I kept saying tourist because you don't say tour, you say tour. You're going to take a tour of someplace.
Right.
And Jamie was like, he's like, "That's East Coast. We need you to say tourist." And like, I've never felt more pressure. For some reason, that line, every time I do it, I would say tourist. I couldn't say tourist. Finally, I got it, which is what you'll hear. "You're a tourist from the future?" And then actually there was a line in the first episode too where I have to say, "And Nightwing said no unnecessary risks to the squad," which is a jumble of a line.
Right.
And you hear Nightwing say it earlier on in the episode, and he says it pretty slow. And then I have to say it in the moment of battle. It was tough. Sorry to kind of get off track.
So this actually gets me into a question I've been wanting to ask. You and Crispin and Jason all have mentioned a quote-unquote voice director. So there's the director for the episode, like Jay Oliver or whoever, but then and I've always known that there is like voice, I don't know, what's her name? Andrea
Romano.
Andrea Romano, who's amazing, right?
Oh,
but she's
so
like
good.
A voice. I love her. She's like a voice casting person.
Yeah.
So can you go through the process a little bit about like how does this work? So you guys do the voices. There's a director there that's separate than the director for the animation. How does all that work?
Yeah, I'm not involved in the behind the scenes as much. I don't want to misspeak, but the way I've always seen it is like on a film set, there's a director, a cinematographer, and then there's the casting director. And the casting director, there's a casting director for voiceover as well. And then there's the voice director, which for me is the only director that I ever meet. And then I see the story director sort of as like the cinematographer. But that's just because my experience on sets is that I don't have a good relationship typically with the cinematographer as good of a relationship as I do with the director, quote unquote.
Yeah, sure.
And you mentioned Andrea Romano. I mean, she casts, but then she also does the voice directing and a little bit of acting. She directed Batman the Brave and the Bold that Andrea, my sister, did. I've never had the pleasure of working with her, but she's directed every DC show except for Young Justice and a lot of the movies. And again, she was a huge imprint on me. Jamie, he's got his own complete biography of shows. I think he did Gargoyles with Greg. I know he did the show of Hercules. He ended up doing the first Tinkerbell movie. Okay. Which I was originally cast in, and then my voice changed. So I recorded like a few sessions, and then the dreaded balls dropped. And I had to relearn how to be an actor. But thankfully, I think that's kind of what my in was for this. Because I like I said, like most actors, I think Jason said he auditioned from home. I auditioned from home. Right. And you don't have a lot to go on, especially for me, because I didn't even know what the show was. So I kind of just gave it my best go. I threw some darts at the wall. You want to make strong decisions.
I'm picturing you going like, what is my motivation for a cloud ninja?
I didn't even know. How do you even envision that? So what I know, Jason said this as well. What I almost always do first thing when they say, do you have any questions? I say, yeah. Do you have any artwork? Can I see what this guy looks like? And I asked that, and they didn't. Because why would they draw a cloud ninja when there's not going to be a show?
Cloud ninja. Right.
But Jamie, I had known Jamie. So that was a very comfortable situation to go into because he's super fun to work with. He's very silly, but he gets the job done. And he's really good at wrangling a bunch of creative personalities. Because when you get a bunch of these creative guys and girls in a booth, hilarity is going to ensue.
Right.
But also a lot of I know there wasn't a ton of improv on Young Justice, but a lot of fun things arise out of it. And Jamie's really good at channeling those directly into the mic. He's also good at not giving line readings. Sometimes you'll get, a voice director who wants you to say it a certain way, so they just read it for you. Jamie guides you to that so that you get it on your own and it's completely organic, which is the most fun way to do it, and I think gets the best reading. And man, there are some incredible voice directors out there that I think everyone should look up. And I don't want to give you names because I don't want to leave people out, but I'll give you a couple. Okay. I mean, there's Wes Gleason, who's been directing a bunch of the DC animated shows, or movies, and he does Justice League Action, and he's done a bunch of video games, and there are a ton of good voice directors out there that I feel like are, if you look them up on IMDb, it says like miscellaneous. You have to they don't even have like a voice director slot.
Well, that's what I'm trying to think. Like I'm like, okay, you appeal. I've been watching animation and analyzing storytelling like this for a really long time, and this is completely new to me, which makes me actually a little bit upset.
Yeah,
for somebody who is this involved in the process that doesn't get credit in a way. I would really like to have him on the show, or someone you might recommend on the show to talk about this process. I would like to get some exposure for them. And now that I think about it, I think Jason mentioned his name to me, and I was like, I don't know who that is. I'll have to look that up later. And
so Andrea Romano, she does the cons and stuff. She'll do like the panels.
That's where I know her from. But I thought she was just casting. I didn't realize there was a whole nother aspect of what she does.
No, she directs the actors. And Jamie, he's also done some of the panels. They're behind the scenes. And, I've never met one that has been overly egotistical, that has wanted people to come to them and say, exactly. I think that kind of goes into voice acting as well. Nowadays it's pretty huge. You've got the conventions and you have some pretty hardcore fans, which is wonderful. But I think part of the draw, for me at least, was always, I used to see my sister. She was on Desperate Housewives for 8 years, and she got quite a bit of fame off of that. And, she'd go to coffee shops or she'd go to the mall, and she always had to look, she had to shower and look nice because she would get recognized everywhere she went. And she would get mobbed. And part of the draw with voice acting is you look at these guys like Billy West and Rob Paulson and Dan Castellaneta and Jason Spizak and Nolan North, and they can go into a cafe wearing a ball cap and no one will accost them. Not saying that when people come up to you, and man, I have had some fans come up to me. I went to the national championship recently in January, of all places. And there was a kid sitting in front of me, and he turned around and he goes, "Is your name Cameron Bowen?" And I said, "What?" And he goes, "Is your name Cameron Bowen?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "You were Robin on Young Justice," which blew my mind entirely. I think at some point, because I was there for a job, someone might have asked me what I did, and I said I was a voice actor. Yeah. And I don't know, he recognized the voice or something. And that was really incredible. But it doesn't happen nearly as much as you'd think because no one sees us. You can kind of get away with anonymity. You can still have your regular day-to-day life and then seek it out at conventions,
Yeah. I'm lucky enough that I have a friend of mine. So Maurice LaMarche is a friend of a friend of mine. And
what?
He's a friend of mine. He's a really sweet guy. And we have lunch every time. So I live in San Diego, so I have the advantage of being at Comic-Con every year. So I meet my friend Joe and we have lunch, but he knows a bunch of people from the industry. He's a comic book store owner in Santa Cruz. If you're up in the Santa Cruz area, go to Atlantis Comic Shop. Atlantis Fantasy World Atlantis Fantasy World is a fantastic shop. But in addition to that, Joe, who owns the shop, is really plugged into the industry, and he's just a great guy that you just want to know. He knows everyone because he's just a gigantic fan. It's hilarious watching him. But we'll have lunch every year when he comes into town, and every year there's some crazy person that I'm having lunch with. And I sat down and I was like, "Oh, nice to meet you." And Joe was like, "Oh, this is Maurice. Maurice, this is Rich." I'm like, "Oh, nice to meet you." I had no idea what Maurice LaMarche looked like. No. So I didn't know who I was having lunch with. And then suddenly he just busts out with The Brain. And I just about burst into tears.
It's so surreal, man.
I mean, and kidding me right now?
The other thing is, you meet an actor, an on-camera actor, or a theater actor from your childhood.
Yeah.
They don't look like the character. You know, if I were to meet Michael Keaton now, I wouldn't necessarily think of Batman.
Right.
But
it's out of context. Yeah.
You meet Maurice LaMarche, and he still sounds like the Brain. When he does his Orson Welles impression, it's the Brain. I mean, it is. And it sounds exactly like it. Or, you know, Rob Paulson, who played Pinky. I go to he does live podcasts at the Improv in LA.
Yeah.
And he's done them with Pinky and the Brain. He's done them with Animaniacs and with Ninja Turtles. And they have one for Star Wars Rebels. And it's really incredible to not only, you know, hear these people live and see what they do, but, you know, hear how grateful they are. And I was listening to Phil LaMarr, who played Green Beetle on Young Justice, along with Aquaman and all these different roles.
Amazing.
Oh, just a legend. Just a legend. And he talks about how, and I completely agree with this, that when you go into audition for a series or a video game or a movie, anything, as a voice actor, there's not a crazy amount on the line. Because if you were to book an on-camera series or an on-camera movie, it might change your career in a drastic way, not just financially, but you might get superstardom. And so he said that from what he's experienced, there's a huge family community in voiceover acting that you don't get necessarily in other facets of the industry, because people just want to get in the room and play. That's why they're doing it. It's not necessarily for the fame or the glory or even the money. You know, that the reason why people get in to doing cartoons is because they love it and they're living out a fantasy of being a superhero or being a cartoon pig or what have you, you know, playing these characters that we saw growing up.
Right, exactly.
And Phil LaMarr talked about, not to make this whole thing about Phil LaMarr, but you should have him on, definitely.
I would love that.
He talks about his experience auditioning for Young Justice and how he auditioned for Aqualad. And then he heard Kari's Aqualad and thought, oh yeah, that's Aqualad.
Yeah.
And it was, and that was that. And then they had him back, thankfully, to do other characters. But, I mean, to have that reaction to when someone else books something that you wanted is so incredible. I mean, and it just seems like I hear those stories all the time.
Crispin told a similar story, right? About because he was in for Superboy or whatever, and then he was like, oh no,
and Jason too. Jason auditioned for Robin.
Oh yeah, I guess that's right.
Yeah. I mean, when you get these scripts, they'll give you a bunch of characters and they'll say, you know, audition for 2. You know, they'll say pick 2. That's not how it happened with me. I only got Robin or Cloud Ninja.
Cloud Ninja.
And I don't remember if I auditioned for Young Justice the first time around. I probably did, but I don't remember. Which I think actually played to my benefit with some of this stuff because, like I said, you know, there is a certain sense of freedom when it comes to some of these things because as a voice actor, you're never wrong for the part. And that's something that being a kid actor really drew me to this was that I used to get typecast a lot based on my image.
Sure, yeah.
You know, I was kind of a scrawny kid, and I would always end up playing, like, the lovable loser or the best friend. And I know Nolan has talked about this. Like, he would always get cast as the beautiful leading man, and he wanted to play the funny guy. And voiceovers allowed him to do that.
Right.
And for me, it was the opposite. I wanted to play Batman. You know, I wanted to play the strong leader types. And what's funny is I ended up playing teenagers anyway.
Right.
But, you know, part of the thing that drew me to it was that you can play anything. And there's a freedom in that because there's no wrong choice. You just have to make a strong choice. You know, it's not the wrong choice. It's the strong choice. I'm going to patent that.
Nice. It's a t-shirt.
That's a t-shirt. It's not the wrong choice. It's the strong choice. But there's a freedom in knowing that they don't have an idea in their mind of what it's going to be typically. So you can go in there and just throw something at the wall. And if it's not necessarily what they're looking for, great, do the next one. Right. But you can feel free to make a strong choice and not worry about the guys on the other side of the glass.
Yeah.
And it took me a while to learn that, but I think that with first auditions, it's a lot easier. With first auditions, it's a lot easier when you're at home and you get the sides and you can just play around in your home studio or from wherever. And you can spend as much time as you want. I typically do first or second take just because otherwise it gets way too zany. Because I'll play forever. Honestly, you can hear I'll talk forever. And so I think that the way that we started with this was voice directors. So you want to get back to that?
Oh, actually, well, kind of, sort of. I'm actually was liking where this was going. But I appreciate that because then the second time you're going in for, like, when they do a callback, do you have to try and, okay, what did I do? Because that can't be, it's not like it's the next day, right? It's going to be like a month or weeks later, at least, when they call you back
exactly.
again.
It's going to be a while. Sometimes it's a week later. But the nice thing about recording from home, and you don't get this with on-camera auditions, is you have your audition.
Right.
You can listen to it. And it's just like with on-camera, you want to dress the part. It's the same thing with going into a callback for animated. They're going to direct you a certain way. This was one of the greatest things that I learned. It's that if you don't think you're right for the role, throw that out the window because they're calling you back for a reason. They liked what you did. They like what you offer. Use your uniqueness in that callback. And if they want to direct you in a different way, let them do that and give them the chance to direct you in a different direction. But go in with, and typically with my auditions, it's a lot of me. I'm not a Dan Castellaneta where I do, 1,000 different voices. I do me in different situations. So, when I did Toyman on Young Justice, he's kind of a man-child. So I aged him up a little bit, and I brought in his backstory, which is, he's this rich kid, and he's hoping that he's going to get in this big, glorious fight with Superman. And he gets confronted with Blue Beetle, who just took down the war world. So, when I come at these, typically my acting process is Cam with a different backstory.
Yeah.
Because I don't really do impressions very much. I didn't come at it from a comedian's standpoint or from doing impressions or voice matches. I came at it from theater. And in theater, you put on costumes, but you're still under there, So that's sort of the same thing I feel like with voiceovers. And so with callbacks, I dress the part. If I did something in the first audition that, let's say it's Cam, but I grew up in England, I'm going to go in as Cam from England. And then if they say, hey, we want Cam to have grown up in Arkansas, then I'll change it to Cam in Arkansas. But I'm going to go in with Cam from England,
Right. So basically you're saying, like, don't write yourself out of the part. You, like, go in and let them, don't make the decision for them about what they want.
Yes.
I think that's a really good advice for pretty much applying for any job, right?
Yeah, I'm fortunate not only to have my 4 older siblings and my younger sister, but to have a lot of good mentors in my life and also just passing mentors. I'm with CESD Talent Agency, and I've been with them for 20 years, and man, they have some heavy hitters. So I get access to some of these guys, on a daily basis just by seeing them in the office. Right. And I took a class from Richard Horvitz actually back in 2011, right before I booked Young Justice. And that kind of broke things open for me. And he's got these 5 steps of a process before you get to the mic. And then you do a recall. And if you didn't feel good about your performance, usually one of those 5 things is missing.
Okay.
But then, I did a Star Trek video game where I was doing a voice match for Chris Pine. And like I said, voice matching is not my strong suit. I can do it, but it's not nearly as fun for me because it feels like there's a right and wrong aspect to it. You either sound like the guy or you don't. There's a lot less of a creative, for me at least, that's how it feels. There's fun to it. It's just a different type of fun. And Scott Menville, who is actually Robin on Teen Titans, and he's on just a ton of stuff. I mean, he's an incredible voice actor. And I was going in to do Chris Pine, and he was there to do Chekhov. Okay. And we were just talking in the waiting room, and I was like, man, I do not sound like Chris Pine. I mean, I don't sound anything like him. And he goes, well, they think you do. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's true. Yeah. So even if I'm not hearing it, obviously there was something in there, and we can work with it. So, and I ended up doing it, and I heard it later, and I did sound like Chris Pine. So
nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I guess, the confidence to know that you are enough, that what you are bringing is enough, because I think that's what actors in all facets, and honestly people in every job, like you said, struggle with is, am I enough? Is what I'm bringing to the table enough?
It's that classic imposter syndrome, right?
Yeah.
Someone's going to figure out that I'm not actually a writer, or someone's going to figure out I'm not. And this happened as I mentioned, I've had a few careers, and it's happened in every career, whether it's creative or not. When I started nursing, it's the same thing. It's very common in nursing for you to get out of nursing school and go into, like, I went straight into an ICU. So I was like, okay. And they were like, look, for the first year, you're just gonna be focused on not killing anyone, right?
Man, you are like a real life superhero.
Stop. That's enough. Stop. But like your mentality is like you're so focused. Like the first year isn't when you make mistakes. It's the fourth or fifth year that you're like, oh, okay, I got this. I'm comfortable. I know what's going on. And you have to really make sure that you're staying focused in those years. But that imposter syndrome, it comes with writers. I work in the gaming industry, and some of the most amazing, mind-blowing writers for gaming, both pros and in gaming industry, I sit and have conversations with them, and they just talk like they don't belong there. I'm like, are you kidding me? You are brilliant. And the hardest thing about any kind of creative industry in my mind is to get out of your own way, to stop stopping yourself from doing the thing, right?
Yeah, I completely agree. And, what's crazy is that the gaming industry has changed so much, and the writing is so incredible. Time and time again, it's like movies. I mean, it's better than a movie because you're playing the movie.
Right. And what you're talking about is video games, right? Like Mass Effect and like these crazy
the Batman games.
BioWare game. The Batman game's so good. What I actually do is tabletop gaming, so role-playing game stuff and that kind of thing.
Oh, cool.
And so it's also it's kind of a niche industry in a niche industry, but like,
so how do you write for those? So like, are you talking like Dungeons and Dragons type style games?
Very literally Dungeons and Dragons. Yes, I do 5th edition conversion stuff from there's various editions. But some of the writers that I'm talking about are like Shauna Germain, who works for Monty Cook Games. She's absolutely stunning. Like her imagination and how she can write the really deep like prose that pulls you into a bizarre science fiction world, but then taking that and so think about this, taking that and folding it into mechanics. Like, okay, so how do I take this thing and make the actual rules of the game feed into the prose, and how do I have the prose echoed in the mechanics? Like it's like a decathlon for your brain. And to have someone like Shauna who regularly posts things like, I'm not having a good, confident day in myself kind of thing. I'm like, are you kidding me? Just stop.
We idolize people that we forget that we're all human.
Right.
I'm guilty of it too. And that's why I love stuff like this. I love podcasts and interviews that give you a glimpse into your heroes' lives. I'm putting myself in that situation, but
you should.
Jason is one of my heroes, and I'm friends with him too. But he is one of my heroes, and Crispin too. Really, everybody that was on Young Justice. I struggle with that, where it's like, how am I involved with these guys? Which is funny because I've been doing it longer than some of them.
Right. Exactly. Right.
But you don't feel that way always. Sometimes you look at these guys and you think, oh my God, that's Static Shock. Like, I'm working with Phil Lamar right now, and that's Hermes from Futurama. And, you look at some of these guys and you think, that guy can't be human. That guy cannot be related to me. I do the same thing with football. I'll watch football and I'll think, that guy's 6'7" and he's, I'm not related. We don't share the same genes.
Yeah,
you see them as these like demigods almost. But then you hear podcasts like this and you hear them talk about things that you struggle with, and you hear them talk about going to the store or just normal guy things. And it puts everything in perspective, and it shows that we're all just chasing the same dream. And we all just want to be, or at least in my industry, we all just want to be behind the mic and play around with our friends,
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, we have some questions that I want to throw your direction too. We had some questions submitted from our Patreon backers and also our friends over at the YJ Wiki and
wonderful.
The Young Justice Needs a Season 3 Facebook page.
I love both those. Love Young Justice Wiki.
Yeah, fantastic.
They're
I'm
so
glad
great
to hear that.
And Young Justice needs a season 3. They're also great. I follow them on Facebook.
They're almost 500,000 followers now. It's bonkers.
Yeah. And they have a Twitter too, but their Twitter only has like 500. We got to get that up.
Yeah. They just started kicking that back into gear.
Yeah.
Anyway, so our friends at the YJ Wiki were talking about, they were actually the ones, one of their contributors, I guess. He was the one who pointed out to me that Andrea was Talia in Batman. And he asked, like, kind of referring back to Andrea, which DC characters would you want her and your other siblings maybe to play in Young Justice, if at all? Or do you feel like they could plug into any particular characters that maybe either haven't been shown yet or didn't have a voice yet?
Yeah.
Like the Hawks and Plastic Man, none of them have voices.
Oh, you mean ones that have already been shown?
Well, either one, like ones that haven't been shown, or actually, if you think they would be great for a particular role that's already been cast, I think I'd love to be here.
Not that's already been cast, but I mean, we haven't really seen Batman's, like, we've seen the Justice League, but we haven't seen his crew. Like, there's no Alfred, there's no Oracle.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, we do have Barbara, but not.
We do
Oracle
have Barbara,
yet.
and that was Alison Stoner, and she did a great job. But yeah, I mean, I'm probably Andrea's biggest fan, which is saying a lot. Because she has quite the resume of work. Andrea's actually done a ton of voice work. So, at times she eclipses me. And yeah, I think I'd love to hear her as Oracle because that's such an interesting, dramatic role.
Yeah, I love Oracle as a character, period. So we were talking about like your siblings. Do you match a DC character to any of your siblings that you might want to hear them playing in Young Justice? And for that matter, actually, just as an aside, you've talked about Andrea and yourself doing voice acting. Are the others more stage and screen?
Yes.
Or have they done voice acting as well?
They've all done voice acting. My older sister Jillian actually played Andrea's role in Desperate Housewives in the Desperate Housewives video game.
Wow, that is ridiculously meta.
Completely indirectly. She auditioned for it and booked it.
That's so funny.
Yeah. And my brother Alex has done a bunch. My older two siblings, not so much. My older sister is a musician, and she travels the world in a band. And I won't mention it because she'll kill me. My oldest brother still does Broadway, and he's the dance captain in Swing in Book of Mormon on Broadway, and has been since the inception of the show.
Amazing.
Yeah,
nice.
he's definitely one of my heroes. He immediately started doing Broadway, like I said, and he's done like 12 Broadway shows. And he lives in New York with his wife and their 2 kids. And where I grew up on 52nd Street between 8th and Broadway, and we lived next door to the Neil Simon Theater. And my brother Graham was in Swan Lake on Broadway, and my brother Alex was in The King and I. And so they both got to work in that theater, and that was always a dream of mine. So hopefully that still is actualized. I'd love to go back and do theater at some point. It's one of my truest loves. Like I said, my brother Graham is that's what he does. Is he does theater, and he's done some on-camera stuff, but his passion is musical theater.
Well, so pulling back to the question a little bit, like, so 2 things really. Like, my siblings and I are all very different personalities, which is always funny to me. And my daughter and my son, you can see some parallels, but they're also very different in some ways. So, do you see like the 6 of you? Can you like look and say like, yes, I'm definitely Tim, and Andrea is definitely Barbara, right?
I think my hesitation in answering this question is that I'm extremely jealous. And no, I'm kidding. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess if I were to try to cast a series with all of my siblings, we would all play extremely different roles, because even though we had the exact same upbringing and we were all kid actors, so we all have experience doing this, they would all be extremely different. So it would be hard to cast a show like that, because I think they'd all have to be brand new characters. So who knows? Maybe you'll hear that someday. Andrea, because Andrea's already played a bunch of roles, she'd probably I would have the easiest time fitting her into a slot and her being able to like bring it. But like I said, they're all super talented. I don't know what I would cast them in as far as in the DC world. That would be tough.
Why don't you think about it, and then if you come up with a list, let us know, and we'll post it up on the website.
Okay, cool.
Sound?
Yeah.
That'd be awesome. So another one of our listeners had asked, do you think that Tim carries the same aversion to becoming Batman as Dick does?
Absolutely.
Or how do you feel about his motivation about, like, what is he going to do when he grows up?
Well, I think I touched on this a little bit, but I think that responsibility of the team and the power that comes with being a fully fledged superhero isn't necessarily at the forefront of his mind. I think that he wants to fill the shoes of his predecessors. I think that he's very present in the moment. And that's why when in True Colors, when he's the leader of that team and Arsenal kind of goes black and starts doing his own thing, it is so infuriating. And I hope that it's infuriating as a viewer because he wants things to go the way that he knows them to be correct. You know, I think that he's watched Batman handle himself. He's watched Dick handle himself. And he sees these guys as his older brothers or dad, you know?
Yeah.
And we just want to impress dad, you know? And when things get out of his control, and that's why that wonderful moment that they wrote in that episode when he can dish on Arsenal and he doesn't.
Yeah.
Is just such, I mean, the show is just written so incredibly well. I mean,
it really is.
It was such a joy playing every single scene in season 2 because nothing was just thrown in there. All these characters were fully fledged, and we were given such opportunities as actors to bring these characters to life because there were no plot holes.
Right.
And the relationships between the characters, even though, like I said, I had to be briefed on the history that happened in between episode gaps, it was all there. You know, once I heard the backstories of all these things, you know, it's all there. And Tim, you know, my version of Tim, it really does seem like he's not trying to achieve glory. He's trying to play his part.
Yeah.
And honestly, like I said, not screw up and not die and not disappoint, which I can sympathize with above anything else. Because, like I said, a lot of acting is playing your part and knowing your place. And if you come in as a guest star, it's not your show. You're there to fulfill your slot.
You're right.
If you're the lead of the show, then great. You can, you know, spread your wings. And I've done both. And I think that Tim's role, or at least how he sees it, is to play his part and achieve the greater goal of teamwork. And so when he's thrust into a place of power, there's no time to joke around. There's no time for frivolity. There's no time to stray from the plan. There's a way that it should be done. And when it doesn't go that way, it's extremely infuriating.
Yeah.
Because it's just like when you're playing a video game and you die and you restart back at the place, you know, the checkpoint.
Yeah.
It's infuriating because you wanted it to go perfectly, you know?
Yeah. So do you think, so from the comics, I don't know how much you've read maybe of Tim since then, but some of the things that were unique to Tim as a character in the comics, which is his being a computer hacker, was actually Tim's shtick back in early 90s when computers were just becoming a thing. That was never Dick's thing. And also he had the new costume and that kind of stuff. So there were all that stuff, some of that stuff that was previously attributed to Tim in the comics was given to Dick, because if you're going to have a modern Robin in Dick Grayson, he needs to be a computer hacker. Like it needs to be a thing, right?
And what a computer hacker.
Yeah, amazing, right? So my concern as a fan of Tim, and I saw this in Batman the Animated Series too, because they didn't have Jason in Batman the Animated Series.
They just had Nightwing and Robin.
Right, and then so they jumped to Tim, but that Tim was a little bit more Jason. It's like they took Jason and mashed him with Tim because he was more streetwise and gritty in Batman the Animated Series than Tim really is in the books. So I guess my question is, and actually one of our listeners had asked this a similar question as well, which is, what do you think is it specifically that puts Tim as a different kind of character than Dick. I mean, you've talked a little bit about his leadership and about what he wants to do, but how do you think he can express himself as a very different Robin than...
Well, again, I think it's the little brother mentality. And for me, that's very real because I have 4 older siblings and 2 older brothers. And everything that comes with being a little brother is, when you, let's say you play a game of basketball with your older brother, they're going to beat you. That's just a foregone conclusion. And you have to learn from that. And you have to take strides to make sure that, all of your mistakes are lessons. But with Tim, eventually he becomes his own superhero in Red Robin, and or in the comics or in the I don't know if has that ever been done in movies or television.
Actually, Tim is pretty rare to show up at all. Like they have Jason, and then they've been focusing on Damian a lot. But Tim and Dick is always there as Nightwing, but Red Robin doesn't show up very much, which is another interesting aspect of Young Justice, is that this is... I mean, I love Batman the Animated Series, but this is the most genuine Tim that I've seen in an animated show that I can think of. And that's one of the reasons why I want to see if you have any insight or idea of kind of about how he may be going forward. He's definitely the most technical Robin. Like, Dick can be a good hacker and they can all be good hackers, but Tim is also the gadgeteer guy. He's the like, as good as Dick is at things like that, Tim is way better. So maybe they'll go that route. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I actually don't know anything about season 3, but they, I mean, I can't imagine that with the character, the way that they've set him up, and I wouldn't say he's joyless when he's at work, but like I said, there's not a lot of room for mistake.
Yeah.
So going forward with that, I almost see that more, him being closer to Batman and his, end story than Dick or Jason, because he's all about the business. There's Batman's kind of a loner. I could see that happening with Tim, creating his own team of sidekicks, or people around him, as opposed to sticking with the team.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like I said, if things don't go his way, it makes him very uncomfortable. It puts him in a place where he can't do his job.
Yeah.
Which, I think is so interesting to play, as opposed to, and I've actually played Robin a few times now, and I've played something closer to Dick Grayson, where it's like the carefree, jovial, nothing can hurt him Robin.
Right.
Which is fun as well. But because this show is so grounded in reality, and because the drama is so real, it's so interesting to play a guy with such true feelings for his environment and the present, knowing that at any moment someone he loves or himself could be killed, And I don't expect them to get, I don't expect him to stray too much from that, because it's what makes him unique, it seems, with all the other kids. He seems to know what's at stake.
Interesting.
And that's why I kind of wanted to bring up that episode with Wally, is on his birthday when he...
Oh, you're talking about Cold-Hearted?
Has to run that heart. Cold-Hearted, man. When he has to run that heart across the country and deal with it being his birthday and dealing with having to fight Vandal Savage and all these other things, but still have the notion that if he doesn't get this heart to this girl, she's going to die.
Yeah.
And it's completely on his arms. And man, when you think that little girl didn't get that heart in time, that was an emotional time as a viewer watching that episode.
Yeah.
And it's one of the few times it's not one of the few times, but it's one of those times in Young Justice where you get kind of slapped in the face with what's at stake.
Right.
And of course, those episodes, man, where they're trapped in McGann's mind.
Yeah.
And they all get killed, and you're watching that and you're like, what is happening?
Yeah. I've been chatting with Nicole, who wrote that episode, Failsafe, behind the scenes, man.
Oh, she's so good.
She's great. She's been really interactive.
Is it Nabok?
Dubuque. Yeah, Dubuque. She's been interacting a lot with our fans on Twitter as well, which is always sweet to see, and we appreciate that. But, like we were talking about the voice directors earlier, the writers also often don't get, I think, the credit that they need. And
Absolutely.
I'm really looking forward to Warner Brothers lifting their lockdown on the writers, because we have a bunch of them, her and Andrew, they are looking forward to come on the show, and I really want to do a deep dive into the process.
Oh, and they're both great. They could not be sweeter.
Yeah,
I mean,
they seem really
I've done a
nice.
couple panels with them, and they are obviously extremely intelligent, but they're super sweet people.
Yeah.
I mean, they're just very giving, and I mean, to have written these parts, and that we were fortunate enough to play, has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
Wow.
Because I'm just so in love with this show, and so in love with everybody that's come together to create it, and with the character. I've been fortunate, like I said, to play the character now a few times, and different iterations of the character.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all because of this show,
Yeah.
I kind of springboarded that.
Well, I do have, based on what you were just saying about your vision of Tim, which I find is a fascinating view of Tim Drake in general, it kind of springs us into the last question that we had a little bit, which is the idea you're talking about. You could see him being a little more parallel to Bruce in his, I don't know, job description, or like how he performs his job.
Yeah.
That loner aspect. But it brings us into our last question, which may be our most important question, which is, how do you feel about Wonderbird? Because, quote unquote, smoochies are important.
Hey, yeah. And the other funny thing is, like I said, I knew Jesse. I've known May for a while.
Nice.
We don't see each other all the time, and we've never actually worked together. But that was kind of a cool thing. I actually didn't know that was going to happen until I read the script.
Right.
For the last episode, which I got, the day before.
Right.
But hey, I would love that. That's a cool little thing to work out. And I think that's really cool for Tim. He doesn't really get to be a kid and experience the things that teenagers experience.
Yeah.
Because he's so worried about doing his job.
Yeah. And I see Cassie as being such a counterpoint to this Tim, and your vision of Tim as you were describing it brings that home a little bit too, because Cass is so... She's like Wally. She loves being Wonder Girl, right? Little less fangirl, a little more Wonder Girl,
Yes.
Like, she loves that part, and she wants to, but she's so different than Tim, even to the point of, like, she literally has superpowers, like crazy superpowers, where Tim doesn't. She's more literally invulnerable than he is, and he has to, maybe, based on what you're saying, like, go step by step, or he might die. Like, he is so worried about that.
Right. So there's the difference between outward strength and inner strength.
Yeah.
And I think that both of them would like a taste of, the other side of the grass.
Yeah.
And May did such a good job as Wonder Girl. I mean, I would never have actually thought of her as that role. And I think she played against character a little bit, in my opinion. And I think it worked so beautifully. And, like you said, with the kind of like carefree youthful feel, whereas Wonder Woman is so put together, Amazonian. And so I would love to see that explored, because, who doesn't like seeing their character find love? When did Tim and Cassie become a thing?
Yeah.
Just now.
Exactly.
Just now.
Exactly. Awesome. Man, I have to tell you, Cameron, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, and thank you so much for being patient with all of our technical difficulties.
No problem. I've had a blast, man. You just allow me to talk. I'll talk.
Yeah, well, we love hearing it, and we love hearing the history in the background, a little bit more about who you guys are, because as you were mentioning earlier, a lot of times we only get to see people's highlight reel and not really kind of the behind the scenes of, the ups and downs and the tougher times too. And we really appreciate you coming on and sharing so many stories.
Well, just one last thing, just touching on something I didn't get to say before about voice acting, is I know, because it's becoming so inclusive, and there's so many things being produced, and there's so many opportunities, a lot more kids are getting into it. A lot of kids are watching shows like this, and they think, I'd like to be Batman. And it's an opportunity that wasn't really available until now.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, it was a really small group, and now it's really opened up. And something that it took me a long time to learn when I was a kid, or at least a teenager, going from kid to teenager into becoming an adult actor, was the idea of keeping that childlike wonder of wanting to be Batman. Watching a show and wanting to be Batman, and just for the fun of it.
Yeah.
You know? And anyway, so if anyone's trying to get into it, I would say don't lose that. You know, it's what makes you unique. It's what makes it fun for us to hear, is not you coming in and doing, you know, a job of playing a character, but being the character because you used to play with action figures and remember what that's like. Anyway.
I love it, man. Thank you so much. Where can people find you? Do you mind if people shoot you questions? And
oh, heck yes. It's my name on every social media, Cameron Bowen, Cameron Bowen on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Vine, boohoo. Vine's gone.
Fantastic. Any other things or projects coming up or anything that you want to point people to that they might want to check out of your work?
Yeah, I have a couple of movies coming out, and I just did an episode of a show that premiered last week. I'm on the 9th episode. It's called Famous in Love on Freeform. And you can binge watch all the episodes on Hulu. And I also have a couple of video games coming out, but man, they make you sign those darn NDAs.
Oh, yeah.
But I have some really cool characters coming up in video games.
Well, when that comes up, please link us, and we will retweet and send out information on those kind of things, man. We love sharing.
Oh, I will. Projects. The next one is actually, this should be happening in just a couple of weeks. We should get news about it.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I was really hoping it would come before this because I wanted to just talk all about this, but it's a really cool role that I've been wanting to play for a long time, and I'm excited for you guys to hear it.
Fantastic. Well, we would love to have you back on when stuff like that's coming out. If you would love to,
love to
coming back. Fantastic.
This was an absolute blast, man.
Thanks so much. And thanks to everyone else for sharing time with us in the cave. You can find us on Twitter at the YJ Files, on Facebook at www.facebook.com/crashingthemode, and on our website, www.crashingthemode.com. You can also now find us on Tumblr at the YJ Files. If you want more Young Justice, the fastest way to get it is to hashtag buy YJ Comics on Comixology and encourage everyone you know to do the same. Buying the comics digitally shows DC that you want more of the things that you love. Christopher Jones, Greg, the cast, the crew, Cameron can only do so much behind the scenes for us, so let's help them help us. If you enjoy our show, please consider sharing it with a friend. You can also support the show by giving us a 5-star review on iTunes, ratings on Google Play, or your podcatcher of choice. The ratings really do help others find the show. If you do leave us a rating, please let us know, especially if you're outside the U.S., because we have to look a little harder for those. If you'd like to support the show in getting more reviews, discussions like this one's, interviews, and so much more, please consider linking over to www.patreon.com/crashingthemode and pledging a few dollars a month. As a thanks to you, we're offering access to our episode outlines, Young Justice-inspired role-playing game adventures, in-depth articles on subjects we've only touched on in the show, a free copy of the Masks RPG from Magpie Games, and the opportunity to play in a quarterly superhero-inspired RPG session run by us. In fact, our first lottery for that game is on the 1st of this coming month, so come by and check out the Patreon. And even though Season 3 has been officially announced, please continue to spread the word to friends and family about the series and get yourself up to speed for the Season 3 premiere. And as always,
stay whelmed, everyone.
You've been listening to Whelmed, the Young Justice Files podcast. Our hosts are Rich Howard and Emily Booza. Our editor and producer is Neil Powell. Our theme was composed by Emily Mio. Our logo was created by Kevin Bates. Whelmed is a fan-made podcast and is not officially affiliated with DC Comics, DC Entertainment, Warner Brothers Animation, and any other owners of Young Justice or its related source material. As such, these companies have sole ownership of all symbols, images, names, logos, and proprietary material related to Young Justice. Original content of this podcast is ours under Creative Commons. Thanks for listening, and stay whelmed.